Okay, class, we're back for video number 2 of the fundamentals of poetry. This video will probably be much shorter than the first one. Now, keeping in mind it's the same handout, the same information, so looking back at that is important. And like we did today in class, we will do examples and more so in class tomorrow as well. So definition. We're going to start with alliteration and onomatopoeia. Alliteration is a repetition of the initial consonant sound in 2 or more words in a line of poetry. Initial meaning the first consonant sound. Consonants are like B, C, D, F, G, H. They're not the vowels. Okay? So Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. You get the initial consonant sound of P that is constantly repeating in the same line of poetry. The other example, Sweet Sally sells seashells at the seashore. Again, you have the initial sound of the S that is repeating. Now, there are more samples on the paper as well, but the thing I want you to note and understand is that it's not always obvious like these two, like it's every word or every other word. Sometimes it's just 2 or 3 words in the line of poetry that the author is trying to call attention to. Okay, the next one we have is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia's definition is the use of a word to represent or imitate natural sounds. Buzz, crunch, tingle, gurgle, crackle, sizzle, hiss. So it's the idea that when you hear the word, you actually hear the sound being made. So a fire sizzles, and you hear the crackling. You hear the sizzling. Sizzling also is like food cooking on a grill or on a pan. Hiss is what a snake does. Okay, assonance and consonance. Assonance is similarity or repetition of a vowel sound in 2 or more words. It's a repetition of the sound. Okay? The vowel sound. Okay? I was looking at my examples here, so before I go on with this. Lake, steak. Okay? The no's and the yeses, ignore those. I actually forgot to take those off. All of these are examples of the vowel sounds. The next one, steak and fate. So you're hearing the A's repeating in both of these. Base and face, base and fate. So you're hearing the same aspect. You're hearing that same vowel sound in 2 or more words. Again, within the same line of poetry, like the alliteration. Okay? The next one, consonants. The definition is the repetition of consonant sounds within a line of verse, not only the first sound, because alliteration only has the first sounds. Consonants has the sound throughout the line. So it could be in the middle, it could be in the end of the words. But such a tide as moving seems asleep. So the sound you keep hearing in the first example is a S. So we get such, and then we get as, and then we get seems with the S here, and then we get asleep. So you have a beginning, an end, a beginning and an end, and a middle. That's what consonant is when that same sound shows up in several places on the line, not only the beginning sound. Okay, the next one. Some mammals are clammy. In this one, you get the repeating M sound with some mammals and clammy. And then the last one, dragging the lazy, languid line along. This one, you get G sounds repeating. You get the dragging, you get the languid, and the along. Now, other things you might hear is the lazy, languid line. That's alliteration. That's why I didn't point it out. But if you were to do lazy, languid line and along and include the L here, then it would be consonants. Okay? Alliteration is only the first sound. Consonants is when you start to add in sounds all over the line. Okay, refrain and repetition. Refrain is a repetition of one or more phrases or lines throughout the poem. It's what we call normally a chorus. And if you think about songs, you always have that one verse or refrain that is repeated throughout the song. Authors do it in poetry as well. Okay, repetition. The definition is reiterating of a word or phrase within a poem. Now, looking at this, how is this different from a refrain? Now, a refrain is the repetition of one or more phrases of lines throughout the poem. Repetition is usually only happening once or twice. So when we go back to like Humpty Dumpty being repeated twice or Double Double being repeated twice, that's not a refrain. It's just a repetition. Refrain is usually 2 or 3 lines or an entire line that's being repeated, not just 1 or 2 words or phrases. Okay, the last slide for this one. It's enjambment. It's the definition when one line of poetry ends without pause and must continue into the next line to complete its meaning. So in other words, it lacks punctuation, because when you look at a poem, and when you read a poem, much like when you read a prose or fiction piece, you're supposed to stop and take a breath where the punctuation is. So something is enjambed when the thought continues on to the next line, or in other words, it lacks punctuation. So if we look again at this example from yesterday, when we were looking at rhyme scheme, you notice the 5 lines, we're looking for punctuation. So line 2 and 5 both have a end mark of some kind. We have a comma, and we have in line 5, if it will show up on my screen, we have a period. Now, which means lines 1, 3, and 4 are examples of enjambment, because the thought continues to the next line, or the sentence continues to the next line. So that's what we call enjambment. Okay, this is the end of the notes. Even though the fundamentals of poetry handout does not end here, the last 6 or 7 are literary devices that should be review, and if they are not, I will do a quick review of them in class and not in video form. Have a good day, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.